Hello, everyone. My name is Denise Rollins. I am the Executive Director of the Whole Heart Grief and Life Resource Center. And today I want to share an activity with you that is all about how we deal with conflict. And if I ask you to raise your hand and said, how many of you just can't wait to have conflict in your lives? I doubt that many of you would raise your hands because as people, we often just run from conflict. In fact, we have so many negative connotations of conflict, and that's one of the paradigm shifts that we need as a community. But today I want you to really consider this. That as much as we run from conflict, the truth is that if our lives had absolutely no conflict and no issues, what it would mean is that we truly are not living wholeheartedly. Because, see, wholeheartedly for us means you're living without reserve or hesitation. And when you live from such a place of freedom and adventure and enjoyment and also making a difference, wholeheartedly, if you live wholeheartedly, it means that there are going to be conflicts from time to time. And conflicts, despite what we say in our society, are not things to be avoided. Instead, what we want to do is find things and opportunities and skills that allow us to resolve conflict in a healthy way. I believe conflict comes from any change. And so if your life never changes, then that's a problem. And so when you get those changes, both negative and positive changes, don't don't be weary of conflict, but be aware that any conflict can be worked through. What I love about the conflicts that I've faced in my life is those conflicts, when dealt with in a proper way, have benefited me. They have helped me to learn, they have helped me to grow, and sometimes they even help me to heal. What I don't like is the times in my life that conflict made me bitter or it made me stuck in a position that I wasn't supposed to stay in. If I say to you that conflict comes with change, I know that I always want to change and grow in a good way. So I take my life to the next level, and therefore the people that surround me go to the next level as well. And so if we're looking at conflict from the correct perspective, it means that we need to identify and address conflict. And I believe that the best way to do it is to stand back from the conflict and not only address it from your perspective, but also the other person's. See, a lot of times we have such tunnel vision that we don't take an opportunity to see anything beyond our own opinion, our own feelings, our own thoughts, and the ways that it impacts us. But if we can see how the conflict impacts the other person, we can often find a way to make the resolution a win-win instead of a win-lose. And I think that if I go through something with someone else, I want them to benefit from it in a good way, just as I do. That way they're not stuck and angry with me, and there's a lot of tension when I see them. That doesn't serve them, but it also doesn't serve me. So let's talk a little bit about conflict. And the way we're going to do it is by using the wholehearted self-coaching model, because that model allows us to look individually at what affects our hearts and our minds and work through our issues by looking at the conflict, what shapes it, and what we do as a result of it. But what we have found is that when you're dealing with conflict with someone else, you can use that same mentality and the same tools to not only look at your position and perspective, but also theirs. Working through that process can give you a different, new, and better approach when you go to the person and try to resolve it. So let me show you a little bit about how that process may work. At the heart of the self-coaching model involves what is the conflict. And that conflict is the change, the circumstance, whatever it is, something that has rubbed you the wrong way. So we always ask you with the conflict to think about the issue that's causing you pain or discomfort. And in this case, apply it to that specific relationship. So I'd like to walk you through what it would look like if we consider conflict from both perspectives, both your perspective and the person with which you have conflict with. So I want you to really identify and be succinct about saying, what is the issue that's causing pain and discomfort between you and the other person? And as you do that, I want you to articulate what it is for you, what's painful or what's uncomfortable for you. But then I want you to put on another hat and say, from the other person, why is this an issue for them? And try to see that sometimes, even though you're fighting over one thing, the way you articulate the issue and the way the other person articulates the issue is totally different. And so if it is different, then that begins to be one layer of why there is a conflict. If it's the same, then name that as well. But we want to be able to see what's the conflict for you and what's the conflict for them. What is causing pain about this situation for you and what is causing pain about the situation for them. And then we begin to see what has shaped both of your perspectives on this situation. And that's where we get to examining both the past and the present. So you want to look at the conflict from your perspective and say, what are the things in the past, those past conditions, that's meaning my thoughts, my feelings, that my experiences that may have impacted how you view this conflict? And so what about your personality informs the way that you see it? What about the beliefs that you have and that you've developed over time? What about your prior experiences? Did you deal with something like this with the same person before or with other people? And that is making you pull back some emotions that came from way back when, but it feels the same because the situation is very much the same. Oftentimes, people can trigger in us something that doesn't have anything to do with them, but maybe it's in a relationship, and we experienced something that had to do with trust in a relationship. So when a new partner, does something that makes us feel maybe we can't trust them, we bring back those old emotions, that old experience, and we almost brand the new person with what someone else did. Or it could be what the same person did. You never know. And so we want to think about what came from my past that could be affecting what I'm feeling, what I'm thinking, and what I'm doing today. We also then want to look at the other person and what from their past. It could be the same thing, but reverse, that you're dealing with an issue of trust in a relationship, but you know that the other person was in a relationship where there wasn't a lot of trust. And some of that is bleeding onto your relationship now. You want to really examine what factors are impacting both of you, because sometimes in the midst of conflict, there is so much baggage underneath the surface, and we've got to pull that out and become aware of it so that we can address it. In the same way, we want to look at what's going on as we look at the present context. Oftentimes, if things are really great in every part of my life and something bad happens in my relationship, I take it in stride. I don't get as stressed about it because you know what? The world is good. But when everything else is going wrong, I can have the same thing happen, but all of a sudden, everything is bad about the relationship because I'm feeling bad about everything else, and that bleeds onto whatever this conflict is. So we want to ask ourselves, what am I going through? What are the kind of things that are in my mind all the time? What are the ways that I'm feeling oftentimes? What are the things that I'm doing that could impact the way that I see this conflict right now? And again, we want to say, what about the other person? What are they going through? If they're going through a really stressful situation, if they're going through a period of time where they can't sleep and therefore they don't have rest, when this conflict comes up, they may act at a heightened level and react in a way that just is not consistent with what's going on. And oftentimes, when somebody kind of acts out of character, we make it about us, we make it a big thing, and a situation that could have been small explodes instead of us saying, wow, I know he's going through this at work. And I also know that the bills are pretty high right now. And so the reaction may be consistent more with those things than with the whatever the conflict is that's going on. So again, you're looking at the conflict, how you both see it, and how you're both in fact impacted by other things that make the conflict either bigger or smaller. This is all about understanding someone else's perspective so that you can resolve, hopefully, that conflict in a way that is a win-win for both of you. So once you've done that, you then want to look at, now I'm asking myself, how have I reacted to this conflict? What did I immediately think? What did I immediately feel? And what did I immediately do? We want to really peel back the layers and examine that habitual behavior that we have so that we understand this is what I did initially. And sometimes our initial thoughts, feelings, and actions fuel the conflict and make it worse. If I immediately think of a negative thought about you because of what happened, not taking time to pause and really examine it, it makes something that is small way bigger than it needs to be. But again, I'm asking myself the same question: how did the other person react? What you'll find about this process is it takes the issue from being right in your face to you're looking at it from a distance and you have a better perspective. So what did they do initially? Because sometimes what they did triggers me. And back and forth, you two are triggering with each other with your words, with your actions, and it makes a situation kind of blow up. So once we think about our initial reaction, it's a great time for saying to ourselves, what is my goal? What's the goal for the relationship? What do I want the outcome to be? And in this case, I really want to consider, what might the other person want? Does this person want this thing to blow up like it has? Or is this just a result of all this other baggage that's coming into play? This is a good chance to check your heart and to think about the heart of the other person, to step back and look at the big picture and what is that goal. And for you, this is where I want you to totally focus on you, in that I want you to think about the goal that you have with the relationship that you can control. Because oftentimes we can say, well, I want the other person to act this way, or I want the other person to admit this, when in truth, we cannot control that. So this result is where we take our power back and we say, having understood everything that's going on so far, I'm going to stand back from that. And then I'm going to say, but what is it that I really want? Before this thing gets worse, what is it that I really want? When I think about the best of me and the best of the other person and the best of our relationship, what is it that I want? And then the last and final step is, again, a step that involves only you. Before, we've been looking at, your perspective and their perspective. When we looked at the conflict, how do you see the conflict? How did they see the conflict? What in your past affects the way you see the conflict? What in their past? What in your present is affecting it? What in their present is affecting it? And what reaction have you had? And what reaction have they had? But these last two steps, what result do you want, really has to be what's within your control, and then your response. This is key, because you're asking yourself, what am I willing to do in order to get the results that I desire? But the piece that takes it to the next level is when you ask yourself, what am I willing to do regardless of how the other person reacts or responds? So this makes it important because oftentimes we choose something and then the other person doesn't react the way we want them to. And then we're mad all over again. And this is where we say whether they admit that they were wrong, whether they ever apologize, whether they ever do another thing, this is what I choose to do. I choose to do this action and let it go. That way I'm not carrying this baggage into another relationship. I'm not carrying it into another situation. I'm beginning to understand the factors that have affected my life and take control over my life and let them go. And so you have an opportunity to go through this exercise to consider both you and the other person when appropriate and decide how you want to move forward through this conflict. As I mentioned before, this can be a win-win if handled right. And so think about something, maybe even a conflict that you thought you resolved in the past, but now you want to take another go at it and you want to face it in a new and a positive way. I encourage you to take the questions from this activity, to use the handout that is provided, and really work through your conflict with someone else. Peel the layers back. When you share what you're going through with your small group, what I'm asking you to do is that those people who are listening to truly listen and bear witness. This isn't about you giving them some quick response or some quick solution to their problem. It is about them saying it out loud, hearing themselves, having you bear witness, and then the person who is sharing needs to be the person who formulates the solution and enacts it. That way they have ownership of what they choose to do, and they have ownership of what path they go on as they move forward. I look forward to hearing good stuff about the way you've processed this. Don't feel like there's one way to do it, one way to answer the question. The biggest thing is to have dialogue about considering your perspective and the other person's before we try to resolve a conflict. Good luck. All right, having completed the activity, then I want to make a few closing points. And I believe that in the midst of conflict, there is so much that we can learn about ourselves and others. And so even as you completed the exercise, going back to it, I want you to think about what surprised you when you were considering the other person's perspective and what would have maybe helped you to know about yourself and about the other person. Um, and especially, how can you use that information as you move forward? Because the more we understand ourselves and others, the better we're able to deal with things that happen in the future. At the core of it, I want you to really just consider that broadening your perspective is really important. Number one, realizing that there's a lot of factors that surround a conflict, and there's a lot of ways to resolve it in a positive way. So I want you to broaden your perspective in that way, but also in the sense that knowing that conflict can be something that you benefit from instead of something that we avoid. And if we're able to stand back from our emotions, because conflict often grabs us emotionally and then affects our thoughts and our actions, if we can stand back from it emotionally, we can see that sometimes through our greatest conflicts comes our greatest growth and opportunity. And the final thing is, as you move forward, I want you to really believe in, think about, consider, and practice conflict resolution. Think about how you can use these tools of considering someone else's perspective as well as your own in current and future relationships so that they are stronger, more powerful, and that you can truly achieve that win-win. That out of that conflict, it doesn't have to tear a relationship down, but it can build one up. I often think of the relationships with the people that I'm closest with, And for all of us, we've been through some type of conflict and gotten past it. And I think that's what makes our relationship special and what makes it stronger. Continue to work through these models. And as you do so, if you ever need any help, remember that the Whole Heart Grief and Life Resource Center is there for you. Thank you.